see you guys in the dark.
When I was little, every few years my family would go back to my mom's hometown, and we'd camp there for about a week or so during the summer when I was on summer break. And this place, Edgewood, is a pretty small town. It has a population of 200 to 250 people, give or take, and was in a very rural part of the province surrounded by forests and rather out of the way with a close-knit community of people who all knew each other. My mom and stepdad and my 3-year-old sister stayed at our family friend's house to visit, but as soon as I sat down, my mom told me to take the dog for a walk and gave me a $5 to take with me to the convenience store along the way so that I could get an ice cream or a drink, which I was thrilled with. So off I went. The walk to the store was pretty uneventful. The town is incredibly small, and practically everything was within walking distance. The convenience store was about a 5-minute walk away, so I didn't have a hard time finding my way there. Once I bought my Pepsi, I went ahead and sat outside in the front of the store in the shade, taking a moment to sip at my drink before heading back to the house. That's when a blue car pulled up. I wasn't in the area often, so I didn't recognize anybody I met beyond the few family friends my mom would take us to visit every time we were in town. The person in the car rolled down their window and looked over at me, offering a smile and a wave. She looked rather unkempt and appeared to be in what I could only assume was her mid-50s. She was dirty, her hair was messy, and her car was covered in rusty spots with cracked and damaged windows. I glanced up, offered a polite smile, and went back to my drink. It wasn't uncommon for people to be friendly in that community, so I didn't think anything of it for the most part. She called out to me, "Hey there. What's your name?" I looked up again, a bit hesitant to say anything. I was a bit shy around new folks. Kayla, I answered, not saying much else. I did get taught about stranger danger, but given that this town was a very small, tight-knit community, it didn't cross my mind at the time. I assumed I was safe. "Well, Kayla, I've got this makeup here, and you can have it if you want. I think you'd look beautiful with this makeup. Do you want to come and try it on? I can help you put it on." That was what made the first siren go off in my head. I shook my head, telling her, "No, that's okay. I don't wear makeup." I was literally 10 and was pretty tomboyish. I never had an interest in makeup, and from a stranger, even less so. I was getting uncomfortable and getting up to leave, as she was insistent on getting me to at least give it a try. I kept saying no and proceeded to start walking away when she offered something else. "Well, what about a muffin? I've got these muffins that are too good to keep to myself. I've got a bunch in the back if you want to come and take one." That was Siren 2. I knew 2 things about walking around by myself anywhere. 1, don't ever take food candy from strangers. 2, don't ever get into a van, a car, or a truck, any vehicle with someone I didn't know. I said no again and explained that my family was waiting for me. She looked annoyed at this point and insisted again. "Well, I can drive you back, but you just need to get in the car." She was snapping at me at this point, and I was reasonably rattled. I didn't say anything else, and instead hurried off with my dog, hastily enough to where I forgot to even take my Pepsi with me. I don't know why, but something in my head told me to not lead the woman to the house my family was at. So instead, I walked off to the campsite, which was about another 5 minutes away. I figured she wouldn't have any reason to follow me to a campsite that likely had other people there in case she wanted to try anything. But of course, here's where I was wrong. The campsite was particularly empty that day, and it's not really monitored by anybody, so this was probably the dumbest idea I could have had. I walked along the path that led to the road full of campsite lots, and sure enough, one glance behind me sent chills down my spine and my stomach sank. The woman was following me in her car. She was a good 10-15 meters away, but was keeping pace with me, like she was waiting for me to stop. I panicked, picked up my dog, and walked a bit faster down the road to see if I could get anybody's attention and ask for help. In my panic, I found one man who was setting up his campsite, and I ran to him as fast as I could. I desperately tried to explain what was happening. I was on the verge of tears, explaining that someone who tried to get me into their car was following me. He hummed and eventually said, "Sorry, I've got my dog with me. I can't leave her here for long. I hope you find your way back," and left me on my own. Tears streamed down my face as I begged him one more time, but it didn't change his answer. I looked behind me and noticed that the blue car was gone. I thought that maybe she gave up or didn't want to be seen. But either way, I took this opportunity to sprint away again, desperately looking for somewhere that would let me sneak back to the house off of the main campsite road. Off the side of the road, there was a very thick array of bushes. I picked up my dog once again and ran off into the brush until I was far away enough and hidden enough from the road. I held my dog tight and patiently waited to see if the car would drive by, watching through the bushes. A few minutes passed, and sure enough, there she was, driving by again slowly, almost like she was looking for something. Once she drove off, I wanted to make a break for it, but something told me to stay right where I was. Another few minutes passed by, and the car was back. She had looped around, driving agonizingly slowly. And that wasn't the first time she looped around. She did this more times than I can even recall. I stopped counting at some point. At the final loop, I saw her park her car down the road a good 40-ish meters behind where I was hiding as she got out and started walking down the road, and again like she was looking for something. I was practically petrified. I laid there for God knows how long, waiting as she walked down the road. Eventually, I heard her mumble something and swear at the end of the sentence before she walked back up to her car. She had the hood of her car before getting back in and speeding off. I waited another half hour, give or take, before I finally plucked up the courage to grab my dog and run as fast as I could back to the house. By the time I had gotten there, my legs were shaking and I could barely stand. My lungs were on fire, and I was on the verge of tears again. My mom came out and scolded me for taking so long, asking me why I was gone for as long as I was. I broke out in tears, explaining to her what exactly happened and how I was followed and looked for at least an hour. She shrugged and explained that nobody here would do anything like that, and went back inside. Our family friend James pulled me aside and asked me to describe the woman and the car. He said, "We know a lot of people here in town. I might know who you're talking about." I told him everything I saw, and he hummed, glancing up while he pondered what he could recall about people he knew in town. "Yeah, I don't know anybody with a car like that here in town. I'll ask around and see if anybody else knows who you're talking about." The rest of the evening was pretty uneventful, but I stayed inside and refused to leave the house. James eventually pulled my mom aside to talk to her again, but I didn't hear their conversation. The remainder of the trip was otherwise calm, but for the rest of our time in town, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere without my mom or my stepdad, and any time I had to take the dog for a walk, one of them always came with me. I don't think I was ever alone again during that trip, excluding when I needed to use the washroom. Whatever James told my mom, I want to say that it got her to take me seriously.
I'm going to start out to say this isn't some flashy, scary story, and it doesn't have the most satisfying ending, but none got hurt, which I am grateful for. This all happened when I was in like grade 5 or 6. I'm Canadian, so we have primary school kindergarten to grade 8, high school grade 9 to grade 12 and 13, then college or university, so I would have been around 8 or 9 years old at the time. I'm now, as of writing, this 23 years old, going to be 24 in July, so my memory may be a bit foggy. But what happened this day will forever stand out to me. I, at the time, 8 or 9 female, and my sister, who was 2 years younger than me, let's call her Paya, went to a little French immersion school growing up. At the time, we were not living close to it, so we had to take a school bus. The bus stop where we would be picked up in the morning and dropped off in the afternoon was about a block or so away from the apartment buildings we lived in. My sister and I would get up at 7 a.m. and catch the bus for 7:30 a.m. to get to school for 8 a.m. There was another family that also caught the bus at our stop with some younger children, so we were never fully alone. But my sister and I made the walk there and home without any adult, because my mother worked nights and my sister and I thought we were old enough to walk the short distance alone. This is important later. This all happened during late spring. Think around April or May, when the weather was getting consistently hotter during the day, upwards of 20 degrees Celsius. I should also note that I have allergenic asthma, which means activities like running or strenuous exercise, as well as allergens like pollen, can and will trigger my asthma. For this reason, I wasn't a big runner, and seeing me run was a rare occurrence. So, in the morning, mind you, I am not a morning person. Bright and early at 7:15 a.m., my sister and I head out to go wait at the bus stop for the school bus. Everything was pretty normal, me being the more obviously tired one of us, but something stuck out to me. I noticed an old brown pickup truck parked in one of the driveways of a nearby house. A person sat in the driver's seat, seemingly doing nothing. This wouldn't have been weird, except I knew the people there drove a minivan. Maybe it was just how ugly the color of the brown pickup was, but it stuck out to me. In hindsight, I should have questioned why the guy in the truck just sat there in his vehicle for over 15 minutes, doing nothing. But I was too tired to care. Off to school we went, and the day was honestly forgettable in how routine it was. On the bus to go home, however, my sister and I got into an argument. So when we got to our stop, Paya took off running back to the house ahead of me, leaving me with the parents who picked up their younger children at the stop, and then after they left, I was alone. I was not impressed by the stunt my sister had pulled, but began my walk down the street with traffic near me going the same way I was walking. I was about a minute into my walk home when I noticed that brown pickup truck that looked oddly familiar. I hadn't realized it was probably the one from that morning, slowing down beside me as I walked. Now it was a pretty hot day out. One kid had collapsed during recess because of heat stroke, so I was having a hard time already due to the heat. The driver of this old brown pickup rolls down the passenger window to talk to me, waving a hand at me to get me to stop. I do stop, because I was raised to be polite. But I keep my distance, the patch of grass separating the curb and the sidewalk, meaning I had at least 60 cm of space between me and the curb. "Hey there, kiddo, where are you headed?" the driver, a man in his late 50s or so, asked. Now I had been raised knowing all about stranger danger, so I was already on guard about this. "Home? I told him, purposefully vague about it. At this point, the man leaned over and unlocked his passenger door, and I was able to see him a little better. He had a tattoo of what I think was a tiger and some other animals up his right arm. He wore a plain gray muscle shirt. I couldn't see what kind of pants he was wearing because I was short. His hair was a salt and pepper of gray and black, pulled into a low greasy ponytail. And he had a mustache. Not to profile, but like one of those stereotypical pedo stashes. His skin tone was tan, but he seemed to be Caucasian, and his hands were large with a scar across his knuckles. "How about you hop in and I'll give you a ride? It's pretty hot out today," this complete stranger offered me with a smile. And I noticed he seemed to have a missing tooth. I, of course, smiled back to not be rude, and simply said a polite, "No thank you, sir," and started walking again. Now this would have been fine and dandy if it had just ended at that. But instead he began keeping pace with me in his truck and insisting that I get in, that it was too hot out, and that all the other kids had been picked up now. This struck me as odd, and still does even now, because this meant he had been watching when all of us had gotten off the bus. Though I guess he didn't notice my sister run off, but still, this was creepy. I again said no thank you, but he didn't seem to take the hint. In fact, he became more pushy, and maybe a little irritated. He had pulled up so close to the curb he was almost jumping it with his pickup now, and at this point I was really feeling scared that this man might do something I wouldn't like. So I quickly said, "Have a nice day," and then took off running as fast as I could towards my apartment complex. I vaguely heard him shout something at me, but I just kept running, cutting over the grassy hill with a few trees on it, instead of staying on the sidewalk. I saw that someone had just left the underground parking area that connected two of the buildings, and ran in just before the big door that let cars out closed. I didn't stop running until I made it up to the 8th floor, got into my house and locked the door. At this point, I was in a full-blown asthma attack, as well as crying in fear. I collapsed against the door, hyperventilating and sobbing, and my sister was now freaking out at how I just burst in like that. But I couldn't get out what I was trying to say as I could barely breath. Eventually I was able to calm down, and my mother came home from what she had been doing, and I was able to explain what had happened. My mother then called the police, and we had a female officer come interview me, to whom I recounted only what had happened on my way home from the bus stop, and the nice policewoman took my statement. Unfortunately, nothing ever came of the investigation, and it didn't help that I couldn't remember the license plate, other than it looked like it wasn't from Ontario, Canada, which in hindsight is even scarier to me. So I never really heard anything after that. But to the man who may or may not have tried to kidnap me on my way home from school, let's not meet ever.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.